during the peer review, so the reviewers don't know the identity of the authors, right?
Okay. So that paper has been through the peer-reviewed system,
Yeah,
and it has to go through that in order to be published.
Published into a journal or a conference. Yeah, all these published papers are peer reviewed, and then
You could get a wild card to the Olympics from a unknown country, kind of a thing.
Yeah, but not gonna win a medal. Then
that's true.
That's the thing. Getting it published is almost winning some kind of prize in a competition.
Hello, and welcome back to the Shintaro Higashi Show with Peter Yu. We're going to take a different approach today. We're going to talk about a PhD. Yeah. And we're going to relate it to grappling somehow. But everyone has been asking, hey, can you make Peter talk more? People request it to be Shintaro Higashi Show with Peter Yu and have Peter Yu in the logo.
Yeah.
Peter's very popular. So let's do it. Let's talk about a PhD. This is take two, actually, because Peter was...
I was nervous, man. Like I said, I think the motivation is that, I really appreciate your support. Like people wanted to hear from me, and also there's some a change in demographic in the grappling world, where I noticed that when I started back in 15 years, not a lot of tech people in this field, in this area. Yeah. But now I realize that a lot of software engineers are getting into this, and especially in BJJ, it's kind of more they're taking it as a more cerebral thing. So maybe I was like, maybe I could take this opportunity to kind of tell people what I do every day, and then kind of make it related to grappling. So hopefully that'll be interesting to you guys. Yeah. So,
all right. So here's an idea. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to make an analogy.
Yeah.
There's theoretical physics and experimental physics. Competition judo players versus the bureaucratic, here's my knowledge, the bureaucratic, like the paperwork guys who just kind of talk about that. And then they do kata and they're in it and they're teachers, right? So there's like a competition route and a non-competition route kind of. So if you were to kind of make an analogy like that, like what would be a PhD in grappling?
So that's actually a good question, because when I was kind of thinking about this episode, that's what I was trying to explain as. So I wouldn't even distinguish between them, theoretical physics or experimental physics is like that. I think PhD students, PhD candidates are the athletes, and theoretical physics, computer science, all these different fields are different sports in a way.
Ooh, yeah, that's interesting.
So interesting, and there's some cross-pollination, obviously, interdisciplinary studies and whatever. But those are
physics, you gotta do math.
Yeah, exactly. So those are different sports, though, with different rules, different expectations, and then a lab is more like a team headed by the professor, the coach, the manager, and then underneath the coach, they might have some postdocs. They'll be kind of like the assistant coaches who they just compete at the Olympics, and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do.
So my dojo is a university.
I think your dojo is more like a university that focuses on undergrad education.
Excuse me?
Undergrad education, which is just as important, I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if you start focusing on actual producing competitors, that's more like the graduate school, I think. You know what I mean? That's how I see it. So.
But if I have a pot of guys training with me after practice, wouldn't that be sort of
then you're then you'll be a university with a graduate school.
Yeah, I like that subtle put down, you're just like a freaking
I went to an
tier 3 community college.
No.
Thanks for that, Peter.
You're a R1 institution that focuses more on the undergraduate education, which is what my alma mater is. Princeton is known for their undergraduate.
You went to Princeton? I didn't know that.
I know. I don't
think anyone knew that. Yeah, there we go. You slipped that one in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's how I view it. So experimental physicists and then theoretical physicists, they kind of play different sports with different rules. Yeah. And then what is the sport they play? What's the competition? It's the journals. It's the conferences. And your medals are basically publishing your paper.
Interesting. And then is the Nobel Peace Prize the Olympics?
Peace Prize, yeah. I mean, that's like a different sport. But yeah, Nobel. It depends. For example, for math, there's no Nobel Prize for math.
That's
so
true.
there's Fields Medal and like Turing Awards is for computer science. So there's some like, but they're not really like Olympic medals because they're more like honorary. Because usually they go to like more well-known researchers who have made that. I guess they'll be more like your like red belts, I think.
Okay. All right. So PhD. A lot of people don't know what it is.
Yeah. So the book definition is Doctor of Philosophy, and then philosophy refers to the original Greek meaning, which means love of wisdom, or the pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, it's an apprenticeship program to become a researcher. What that means, like independent researcher. So a person who can formulate their own problem and then kind of solve that problem and then convince your peers, others, that your research is valuable.
You know, I love that because yes, when you're in a master's degree, you know, you're at a higher level of understanding. If you're getting a master's in, like, let's just say, like, I went to Stern for my MBA, right? You get
you went to Stern?
I went to Stern. Not shy about that, you know. I'll tell you. But you're really just reading texts, answering questions, doing case studies, and you're kind of just following the syllabus.
Yeah.
You're not really coming up with your own ideas. You're just studying other people's ideas, other people's literature, and then trying to solve problems the way, and there's a solution to it already. Somebody already solved it. You're doing it, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like just going to dojo and learning from a teacher.
I mean, that's kind of a good analogy. So a master's degree would be more about like actually learning the art. Yeah. But I think once you start competing, you can kind of say that, oh, you're getting a PhD actually, because that's when you need to come up with your own solution and you're adding to this body of knowledge, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's the main thing. You're trying to specialize in something, right? Yeah. Maybe I specialize, you know, in Newaza transitions from top to bottom, like Kanto, right? He didn't learn all that stuff from somebody. He's adding to the body of knowledge of judo that existed before, and he has an entire system, Flavio Kanto, right? From top to bottom, the ground, standing to ground transitions, and now there's a whole section of people who study that specific thing.
Yeah, and that was his PhD dissertation in judo, basically. I mean, and then and then the last piece is that you have to prove that it works, right? And you have to convince your peers. So. And Flavio Kanto did that by competing at the highest levels and getting results. And so, of course, I mean, me included, like, not every PhD student is going to make, like, groundbreaking discoveries, you know. But and just like not all judo athletes will medal at the highest levels, but in a way, in their own specific specialties, they make some contribution, and then you know, and then also, so after you get the PhD, if you're a PhD, that means that you've proved to your peers, like your other PhDs in your field, that you are capable of conducting independent research. Just as like if you medal at an international, like, prestigious judo competition, you've proved yourself to be a competent judo player who can add your own flavor to it.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
So if I go to PubMed and look up research, you know, on certain things, like for instance, like I was look up the study of, not because I'm on anything or anything like that, but I was looking at the link between testosterone and heart arrhythmias. And there's all these research papers that come up.
Yeah.
If someone's a PhD student doing that thing, is that ranked lower than people who are established, or if it comes from a much more prestigious university, as opposed to, or is it like everything there is even playing level? So, and everything that's relevant will pop up to the top.
So that's a good question. Like, you're basically asking which paper is better than the other in some sense, and more credible, right?
Kind of, because I know, yes, bigger population size, whatever it is. Yeah, I get all that. But like, which one shows up at the top versus?
So I don't know the PubMed system, but usually, so there are a lot of questions in here. But let's go with if the paper written by PhD students up first, or like at their level. You have to understand the actual research of like the pipettes and the writing code, and it's done by the PhD students. the actual competition, just like in judo and BJJ, the competitors actually compete, not the coach, right?
Yeah, true.
The coach's name is on the paper, or the PI, principal investigator, the professor, the advisor, his name's on it because they help the students or the athletes actually do the work, right? So you have to understand most of the scientific research is produced and conducted by the PhD students.
Okay,
Graduate students.
Got it. All right, so who's the most published person in your field?
In my specific field, there's a professor named Yejin Choi. She's a Korean lady. She's a professor at University of Washington. She's very well known. She's a kind of a celebrity in my own specific field. Yeah.
Okay, so how many papers has she published?
I don't even know, man. So usually they count by how many citations you get, how many times people have cited your work to build upon. So
isn't it risky though if one of the things that she did was not true and everyone kept citing to it, and then all of a sudden you're building your ideas on something that's not real?
That's just the nature of it. So I think one thing you have to understand, and I think I want to also dedicate another episode to this peer review system. But it's just like the competition too, judo competition. There's one meta that works so well for a while.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
and then sometimes someone else comes and say, "Hey, that meta is actually shit. Let me show you how." That's the exact scenario that you just described.
Yeah.
Yes, there. I was not gonna go into details about hard work, but like there's some assumptions that have been made in our field that have been shattered like that. So it's more of the science doesn't happen like in linear fashion. It's more like this marketplace, or just like a competition.
So how much more is it important for you to get to a well-cited professor than as opposed to like a nobody at like a B-tier university?
As a PhD student?
Yeah. Like if you went to her and then did your research under her versus if you went to, I don't know, pick a university that no one knows. Well, like, would your paper still be visible?
Yes.
Just the same amount?
So the peer review system, when you publish, it's double blinded, so they don't know who you are. You don't know who the reviewers are. So that kind of prevents that problem. So when you don't know where this paper comes from.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's.
But you could see who funded it, though.
No, nothing. You can't have any kind of information that can identify.
All right. So I looked up. I read an article or research paper on on Cialis. Because I was watching. I was trying to study
for science.
For science, because they were claiming that Cialis prevents estrogen aromatization, right? So, it's good for you. And then I was looking at it, and I'm like, more than 10,000 participants, blah, 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 funded by,
The Cialis company?
Yeah, I think Sanofi or something, right? So, but that kind of proves your thing wrong, no?
During the peer review, so the reviewers don't know the identity of the authors, right?
Okay. So that paper has been through the peer-reviewed system.
Yeah.
And it has to go through that in order to be published.
Published into a journal or a conference, All these published papers are peer-reviewed.
All right, so
you went through that thing, and then that's the thing. Does the fact that it was funded by the company make it a little sus? Yes, but does it mean that the paper itself was bad? No. Just like Russian athletes doing Russian judo are funded by some oligarchs or something, and is that bad? Not necessarily. That doesn't mean that the athlete's prowess in judo is bad.
All right, so let me get this straight. This study was done by this company. It gets done. There's a paper that says, yes, if you take Cialis, it helps with estrogen aromatization. It goes to a peer review period?
Yeah, so...
Before it gets to me?
Yeah.
All right, so how long is that period?
It depends on... So, I'm assuming... So this is in the medical side of things. So I am only tangentially familiar because my wife did some clinical medical research as a doctor. But medical papers are usually published in journals. And journals, you basically send it in. I think every month you can send it in or something. The editors and the reviewer will assign reviewers to this, double blinded, and they'll say either reject it accept with revisions or accept outright, right?
Yeah.
If it's accepted with revision, you have to make the revisions before they get published into a journal. Rejected, you can't. You gotta do something else.
So how many people peer review this thing?
I don't know. So in my field, you usually get 3 reviewers.
Yeah.
And if they're scored, I don't know about the medical field. It's the field defender, very sports.
Do you know who's
defender.
reviewing your stuff?
No, that's what it means to be double blinded. You never know who your reviewers are. But they are experts in
But
they
you
know their
have
stuff.
to review other people's stuff too. You personally.
I do review other.
How often?
works. It's kind of voluntary based, but when usually.
That's I thought you had to do that to get a PhD.
Oh, I mean you do because when you publish nowadays,
Yeah.
there's so much volume.
Yeah.
It's very field dependent. In my field, because there's so many new papers that come in, when you submit to a conference, you have to review other papers. Or my field is run through conferences. The conferences are more prestigious than journals in my field because a lot of reasons. But yeah, so there's some people who argue that reviewers should be paid, but I think they also introduce some other stuff. But yeah, so at the end of the day, if you see if a research paper trickles down to the zeitgeist like a lay person, it's thoroughly reviewed. There are probably other papers that criticize it. Yeah, it's like it's gone through the competition circuit basically.
Okay.
That's like a result, and then it's double blinded. No one knows. Yeah, that's the whole thing. You don't know who wrote this. You don't know who's gonna.
Are there
review it.
papers that are just useless?
So you can put it on what they call a preprint, meaning that's not been pre-reviewed.
Yeah.
It just has less credibility. It's kind of like, oh, I won a medal in my local judo
No, here I'll
gym
give you one.
tournament. Yeah.
My father was part of a research. I told you this, right?
Oh yeah, with the
With the
hard
Tokyo
stuff.
University.
Yeah.
Tokyo University, one of the most prestigious universities way back then. And my father had this theory, like, all right, the more you could push your hand into someone's scapula, your scapular mobility has a direct correlation to athletic ability. So the more you could stick your hands into someone's scapula, right, and they measured the length of how, right, the better you are an athlete, So he had this idea, and obviously I was like, that's the dumbest theory I've ever heard. What was the result? And he was like, there's no correlation.
Yeah.
So can you come up with a bunch of these, like, and can you get that published? It's not even a useful paper.
So
right?
That's what they call a negative results.
Yeah.
So it is a little harder to, I'll say a lot harder to publish negative results because
Because I was wondering, like, why don't you just do a lot of negative results? Like,
so because it's not. So it's like some nuance to it. So for example, in mathematics, negative results are also more. It's in my understanding it carries more weight because you can actually logically prove that this is impossible.
Gotcha.
Right? But in more empirical fields like mine or your father's idea, just because you couldn't prove that correlation doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Maybe your dad's experiment was just designed wrong. So it's hard to convince, get that through the peer review system because as a reviewer, I'll question that. I was like, I think your design was flawed,
Yeah, I think it was like measuring, running, jumping.
Yeah, I think I'll be like, maybe the
regression analysis or something.
Yeah, and then I would argue that the definition of what a good athlete is pretty broad. So I think maybe that's where he failed. And then you get this kind of feedback, and then if it gets rejected, you can go back and then kind of redo your experiments and then make it stronger.
So if I have a theory right now, let's just say, eating peanut butter makes you stronger. I could design a study and then freaking run this and then get it published, and I could be a freaking guy. Yeah,
you could, but here's the thing. Going back to the judo BJJ analogy, you're just saying, can a random dude train and have come up with a crazy meta that's like unheard of?
Yeah.
Train it for a bit, and then make it to win a medal in the international circuit. What do you think? What do you say to that?
You could do it in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, because it's a newer field that happens in science and other disciplines too. If it's a newer field, you could do that. But that's the thing. Like, wouldn't you need a team to train and then
You could you get a wild card to the Olympics from a unknown country, kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah, but not gonna win a medal. Then
that's true.
That's the thing. Getting it published is almost winning some kind of prize in a competition.
So what is a good number of publishings?
It depends on the field. Like my field, like for my field, the dissertation usually has like 3 to 4 separate papers kind of looped in together.
So you have a proposal review December 9th, okay?
Yeah, I do.
So when that happens,
Yeah.
what is the process? Where in the process is that, a proposal?
I see. So I could go through that. So PhD is so widely different from field to field, but that it generally follows this trend. So in America, Europe has a different system, slightly different. But in America, the first 2 years you take classes while you're kind of formulating your own research ideas, like small projects. So that's and then at the end of this 2-year mark, you usually take what they call qualification exams, quals, and then that depends. The format is different from field to field. I just had to present my own research.
Was the coursework difficult, more so than the master's?
No, I think the master's coursework is a lot more difficult than the PhD because as a PhD student, that's not your goal. You just graduate level PhD courses are a lot lighter on the actual work because they're there to kind of just it's assumed that you are already self-motivated to study. So what they do, a lot of the PhD courses are designed to kind of show you different areas. Hey, there's some research in this area, that area. Why don't you go and look it up yourself, kind of thing.
Interesting. And then the term mastering out is when you drop out of a PhD, you just take a master's degree?
So in the typical American program, you get a master's as a part of the PhD. So when you pass the quals, or if you fail, you still get a master's because you took all the master's courses, right? So mastering out means that you decide to quit before you're getting the PhD for a variety of reasons. Maybe you didn't pass the quals, you get multiple tries, but you just didn't work, or just you didn't vibe with the advisor, which is very important. Like it's kind of like it's not working out with your coach. You can't compete and train. You know, it's like same thing. So then, usually you propose your dissertation, like basically saying, "Hey, this is this is the new research I'm gonna do." Basically, you're kind of declaring that I'm gonna win. I'm gonna go to this competition and win a medal, kind of thing. This is my goal. And then after that you do your research, and then you at the end defend your thesis in front of the committee, your thesis committee, which comprises of your advisor and other professors who are familiar with your research. That's like once you pass that, then that's not really a competition because it's not double blinded anymore, right? So that's more like, hey, you're a good athlete. It's like as a community, your peers recognize that you have the ability to conduct own research, meaning you can compete at the highest level.
So so you get the PhD. Let's say you pass. Right? They're like, all right, you're good. You get your cap and gown. That's it, right? So let's say you get accepted here. That's over. You have a PhD.
My proposal is accepted, and I do the research, the last bit of it, and then I defend at the end. And I'm a doctor then after.
When is that going to happen, you think?
My goal is to do it in May next year. And then usually that's like my 5-year mark, and then that's there's some funding issues, so I get my school guarantees 5 years of funding. After that, I have to get my own money, like somehow, or my advisor has to raise money. So that's another thing. Like it's a team, and also a lab is a team, and also like a little startup run by. So the advisor's primary job is to actually raise money. And
so now you're done with the PhD, right? Are you going to keep writing more papers or no?
So there are multiple routes, usually depending on the field. So the PhD was actually, the primary goal is to train independent researchers, meaning they will go become professors, right? But the economic reality is that professorship is not. It's very hard. There are not that many openings, and it's gotten very competitive. And the one fortunate thing about my field is there's a lot more money outside of academia. So I mean, that was always my plan anyway. I'm gonna go get a job in industry. And
So you're gonna be a dirty capitalist.
I know exactly. So,
Out of all like the self-righteous, do the right thing for the world and the body of knowledge, and you're gonna go out there and be
just some cog in the machine, you know.
You know that the hypocrisy, Peter, the hypocrisy.
I'll say I never intended to become a professor. I'll say that.
You know what this reminds me of?
What?
When the peak of COVID, you know, you were like, mask up. You were like a mask police. Do this, do that. Be on the right side of history. Guys, I'm going to do a wedding, in the peak of COVID. And guys, it's going to be socially distant and all that.
I follow all the regulations. I mean, that was such a strange time, wasn't it?
Yeah, guess what? Now all the things that I was spewing back then are true now.
What things like what?
Huh? No, don't get me started, Peter. Don't get me started.
I think that kind of goes back to, I think a lot of people were confused during COVID because it was such an extraordinary time that science, you kind of saw the raw side of science, I think, back then, because it was such a novel thing that, I mean, that's usually what happens if you are if you're a researcher. The confusion and then what's right, what works, no one knows. That's kind of like where I live.
Let me say something about that, okay? Not the usual nonsense that I'm spewing, but based on our conversation today, in that short amount of time, there's not enough time for peer review this and that.
You can peer review during that time. I mean, it's a couple of years.
You can publish
but then
that. Okay, March comes out. March, boom. Oh my God, there's this thing. It's March 2020. By the time like 3 months come, like in 3 months, like you could have all these new papers that have been peer reviewed, that have been through the process and all this stuff.
But the peer review doesn't mean that it's true. The peer review means that they have a hypothesis. They conducted the right research to support that hypothesis. It's of good quality.
Okay, so so you're really reviewing the process as opposed to like
the process. Yeah.
All right. So when do you try to poke holes in it and be like the thing is not true? Like when do people start doing that?
A lot of the faulty methodologies are filtered out during the peer review is not perfect, obviously, but a lot of bad papers, so to speak, are filtered out. Once published, then the real match starts. That people will publish responses to it. Science is more like it's like a competition. Always people trying to poke holes. So that's why during COVID, it's such a novel thing and it was developing so fast that the usual scientific process was just not fast enough. So they just defaulted to what we knew, which was the Spanish flu. A lot of the assumptions about COVID were made based on Spanish flu. And then, which were not all correct. You know, COVID is a different virus. So that's why there was a lot of confusion in like implementing new rules. But people are just trying to be just to do the safest thing, knowing like based on the knowledge at that time. But
we'll do a whole separate episode about
the
that.
peer review. That'll
be fun. But you could even say COVID on the internet back in the day.
Yeah, it's because it was like, I think a lot of people were scared by the uncertainty, but that's kind of how it is in science. Like, I think the biggest pain point, the biggest challenge of a PhD is how to handle uncertainty. It's taxing on your mind. Some people revel in it, but I really struggle with it. Uncertainty.
Interesting.
Because you just don't know. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? You just don't know what's going to work.
Yeah. Speaking of tech, can we talk about churn?
Oh, yes. Churn. So, if you're in business, then you have customer churn. Don't you have customer churn, Shintaro?
All the time. All the time. Yeah.
So, whether you're building a startup, growing a mom and pop shop, or maybe a dojo, or operating in a Fortune 500 powerhouse, Hakuin.ai measures, predict, and improves your customer retention. Link in description, HAKUIN.ai. It's from our dear friend, Drew. And
he's one of our sponsors for the podcast. Thank you also to Jason. Thank you also to Levon, Judo TV, Discount Code Shintaro, Higashi Brand, and Fuji Sports. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Please leave it in the comments whether you or not you liked the PhD discussion. So different from what we've done. But I learned a lot today just now.
Yeah.
You know, I learned a lot. And then, you know, this is very interesting. Maybe it could be like a segment that we do.
Yeah, you know, if people like it, and you know, I can talk about other aspects of conducting research, and maybe I can comment on some tech stuff, you know, and but yeah, all in all, I think like I said, like science is very messy, very distributed. Like everyone has all the incentive to like poke holes at each other, just like judo, BJJ competitions. You know, I think that's kind of like what I wanted to tell you, and be nice to your friends who are doing their PhDs. It's a tough job, tough work.
It is for sure. All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.